Hi, folks. Welcome back to another episode of RunYogi Diaries. This is your host, Santosh Shiva. Every week, I bring you conversations with people who are on a journey of well-being and fitness through endurance sports. I hope they spark some possibility in you, leave you with some tips, and perhaps inspire you to perspire. This episode is also available on leading podcast platforms if audio is your thing. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing to it. Hit like if you like this video, and remember to leave your comments. Let us know if you took something away. My guest today is a pioneer of sorts for the ultra running scene in the San Francisco Bay Area. A sport once rare amongst the South Asian American community, he was an early pioneer. An accomplished runner himself, he has additionally coached and inspired many to take up the sport. His running experience is so rich and laced with so many initiatives. We spoke at length about how it all started, his philosophy in coaching, what gives him joy about making people complete their first ultras and marathons, his adventures in ultra running, and what's next for him. Let's welcome Rajeev Patel. Right. Hey, Rajeev. Welcome to RunYogi Diaries.
Thank you. Thank you, Santosh.
It's such a pleasure having you on the show. You are a pioneer of sorts in ultra running for us South Asians in America. And I know now there's a whole bunch of people taking this on, 100 milers, 200 milers, but you were one of the early pioneers. So it's such an honor, and I'm so stoked to be able to speak with you.
And I am so honored too that you have agreed to interview me and given me a chance to talk. Thank you. Thank you very much. What you're doing is amazing. It's an invaluable service to all of us out there, athletes, non-athletes, to the world at large. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So before we jump into the weeds, I'll let you do a quick personal introduction and then we'll jump in.
Sure. So my name is Rajeev Patel, and I grew up in India. I was born in Bombay. I grew up in India. I went to college in Baroda, did my Bachelor of Engineering there, chemical engineering. Came to the US in 1984 to do my master's in chemical engineering. And I worked for a couple of years in Charlotte, North Carolina, went back to India for a couple of years to be with my mother. She basically was suffering from breast cancer, so I spent a couple of years with her. Actually, I spent about 2.5 years. And during those 2.5 years, I wound up joining TCS in Bombay. And I wound up becoming a software engineer. So from there, I went to Muscat, Oman for just a few weeks short of 3 years. And I came back to the US in 1995, specifically to the Bay Area. And I've been in the Bay Area since 1995. And I work for a large company out of Houston. My specialty is database performance. I basically joined Oracle back in 1997. I worked for them, was it 97 or 96? 96. And I worked for them until 2005, and then I joined BMC Software out of Houston. I've been with BMC since 2005, so it's been 16 years now. It's been a phenomenal 16 years. I've leveraged my Oracle database expertise. Along the way, I picked up SQL Server expertise. So now my job for the last, 5-7 years has been just customer focused. I get pulled in to solve problems with customers who are having performance issues. And it's just the most rewarding thing because my brain is geared towards solving puzzles. And I'll explain why this is relevant, especially when it comes to my running and etc. So I love puzzles. I love solving mysteries. And so my job is the perfect fit. I just enjoy doing my job and I love it. So that is the non-running background. And I can talk about the running background if you would like, or I'll wait for your questions.
Yeah. Before we do that, I found it very fascinating. You must probably are one of the few people who work for a Houston company in the Bay Area. It's usually the other way around.
Yes, that is true.
And
That you are in Houston now.
I'm in Houston, so it gives me tremendous pride.
BMC Software, oh gosh, was founded a long time ago. And the BMC stands for the initials of the three founders. And they bought a local company called Remedy over here in early 2000s. And I worked for the Remedy arm of the business.
Sure. Yep. Yep. Oh,
Yeah.
I remember all those days. Terrific. So, thanks for the introduction. Now, currently, in terms of your running journey, you're an ultra marathoner. You run, some very amazing, crazy distances. For someone who's not a ultra runner, some of these distances look inhuman almost. But let's get into that. But you're a human. You're a mortal human being who has done this and accomplished it. So let's kind of get back into a bit of a flashback here and start from how did running come about in your life?
So when I, growing up in high school, I went to St. Xavier's High School in Bombay. I went to St. Xavier's College for a couple of years, MS University in Baroda, and I was working for TCS. All those years, my first love, my biggest passion, it still is today, when it comes to anything other than running. Running is my biggest passion for sure. Is cricket. So I was a wicket
That
keeper. I was an opening batsman.
so
We're
so
Indians.
Rajiv, that's a confirmed stereotype for an Indian, right?
Yes, we're all Indians. We're crazy about cricket. And so basically, I have had an athletic background, not in running per se, but in cricket as a sport. So as a wicket keeper, as a leg spinner, as an opening batsman. And so I was pretty good at that. I'm not, I wasn't exceptional. I was quite good. I captained, even in Muscat, Oman, I captained my team and we were finished second 1 year in the league. So it was just, it was just that athletic mindset that basically made me gravitate towards running when I gave up smoking in 1991. And I would not say I'm obsessive. I would say I'm a wee bit obsessive. So I used to be hooked on smoking and I replaced it with this thing called running. No idea what running was all about. The first day I went out for a run, it must have been maybe half a mile all told. And my chest felt like it was on fire. But I persisted. And that's one
So
of the
was it
things.
was it like a how did running come about, in the sense that did somebody tell you to do this kind of thing, or
Yes, so someone said take up running because it's a great way to control weight gain and you've stopped smoking. Smoking is an appetite suppressant. When you quit smoking, your appetite opens up. I was in Bombay at that time in 1991 working at TCS. My mother was an awesome cook. I was gaining weight. And so I said, hey, why not give this a shot? I used to do, well, part of my weight was muscle. I used to do a whole bunch of push ups and crunches. But my cardiovascular fitness was almost non existent because of the smoking. It takes approximately 10 years if you quit smoking, if you've been smoking for a long time, for your lungs to kind of totally clear up. So I was still in the incipient stages of my lungs being totally shot. I mean, by shot, I don't mean I had any kind of lung issues, but my breathing wasn't very good. So I took up running and eventually I persisted. I moved to Oman in 1992 and I continued to run there on the beach, help strengthen the muscles of my lower, my feet. And I basically started running longer distances in Oman, in Muscat. I used to go out for runs after my work every day, 5 miles, 7 miles. And, when you go beyond a certain distance, for me, it was about 3 miles when I went beyond 3 miles. Um, these days, the myth is that it's something called endorphins, but endorphins are too large to have the effect they do. Research has said there's another molecule. How beautiful that they've named it Anandamide, from Anand, the Sanskrit word for joy. So they attribute the runner's high to something called Anandamide. And my runner's high really started after I went beyond 3 miles and I got hooked. Like most of us, like you did back in 2008, was it when you started running?
yeah.
And so then, weight wasn't an issue anymore. It was just running, running, running. And I had no idea about anything, nothing about anatomy, nothing about injuries. I was impervious to any kind of injuries in those days. I felt like I was Superman until I had my first injury. Um, luckily for me, it wasn't something major. It was just a swollen knee. but so that was what propelled me into running. The fact that I wanted to control weight gain, but the weight gain got replaced eventually by my runner's high, and I was hooked. I actually used to solve problems at work while I was running, and I don't know if you've experienced that. A lot of people experience this. When your brain is working overtime, some part of the brain is working on something at work or something in your life that you need to solve or resolve, and the answers come. I was shocked. I said, "Man, this is one more reason to keep running." You know.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And it's like almost 30 years. And what? This
Yeah.
must be in your early 30s when you started this?
Yes, I was 31 years old when I
Wow.
started running. So I just turned 61 back in February. I've
So,
been running for 30
since
years
we
now.
talked about cricket, you're like Sunil Gavaskar. You just
Oh,
stick
he
in the
was.
wicket for a.
Oh my God, you have no idea. By the way, for your information, 1974. No, sorry, 1971, 71. When 71, I was 10, 11 years old. Sunil Gavaskar had gone off to the West Indies to play. He was his, and even to date, he has the most number of runs by any Test debutant, 774 runs in his first ever Test series. Guess what? He wrote a letter to my school. He was from St. Xavier's High School, my school. And he wrote a letter thanking the school and including Father Fritz, who discovered him, so to speak. And we went, the whole school, every class, every person was made to go past the letter and read it. So he was my idol until I found the greatest batsman I've ever watched, Sachin Tendulkar. But that's a different story.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm a
absolutely.
Tendulkar
So
guy.
you're totally. So your running innings is like that, like Sunil Gavaskar's innings. I remember
There you
those
go.
days. He never used to get out, right? And we used to wonder,
I
boss,
know.
either you get out or makes runs.
They wrote a calypso on him in the West Indies in 70 71. If you go look up, they talk about the fact that they could never get him out.
Get him out. Yeah, yeah.
Truly.
Awesome. No, that's awesome. So and then yeah, let's kind of let's progress in your own journey in running. You started running, you're in Oman, then you moved to the Bay Area. And so then what happened? And how did the long distance endurance running bug hit you?
So when I moved back to the Bay Area, basically I came back here and I was looking for a job. So in the meantime, I was interviewing. In the meantime, I had all the time in the world in between interviews and trying to find a job. So I just set out for a run, and I'm talking about 1995, 96. There was no question of races. I had done a few races in Oman, like 15Ks and 5Ks, and I wasn't interested in racing. I was just interested in running for the sake of running, which is still the case today. It's always been the case. I don't do races because I want to achieve a time or achieve a certain distance. I do races because I love the pure act of running. And there are a lot of people out there like me. I'm not saying I'm unusual, but I do know that I don't have that idea of going and achieving a certain time, uh, et cetera, et cetera. So I was just running. I'd run 50, 60 miles a week until a friend said, "Hey, I'm running the Big Sur Marathon. Would you like to run it with me?" I said, "Oh, okay, this, marathon. Let's go and see what the marathon feels like." My longest runs used to be about 20, 22 miles when I was running on my own. So I said, I don't have to scale up much. So that was back in 96 because I ran it in 97 April. And I did the marathon. It was a case of, I told my dad I'll finish in 4.5 hours. I finished in 4:32. He was there at that time. They were at the finish line. And it was a question of been there, done that, got erased from my mind. I've done a marathon, fine. There's nothing more to discover. Kept running until another friend 3 years later in 2000 said, "I'm running with my mother in the rock and roll marathon in San Diego. Would you like to come and run with us?" So I said, this way I can get to go to San Diego. So I went to San Diego and I ran with her and her mother for the first 2 miles, but they were slower than I was. So I said, "Hey, I'll see you at the finish." And I took off and I finished the race. And so again, it was a question of been there, done that. I've done 2 marathons. But then I was in Oracle at that time, and during the summer there, um, we had a group of people who would run pretty much every day. And they used to do impromptu speed work out on the Foster City bike path over there. We do quarter milers, 400 meters. and 5, 6 of those every Tuesday and Thursday. And the other days we just go out for a run. So because I was part of the group, I'd go and do it, and I'd be the last one to finish. All the others were way faster than me. I'd be the last one to finish, but I kept plugging away because it was just interesting, something different to do. And I had 3 friends, and basically that was the time when I became the captain of the Oracle running team. Oracle used to have a running team that used to take part in different competitions, one of them being the most famous inter-company challenge that they have across the US and 2 major international cities, Frankfurt and London. It's called the JP Morgan Corporate Chase Challenge. It's 3.5 mile race. So I became the captain sometime in 99 or 2000. So we had one of the fastest runners in the Bay Area, a 2:17, 2:18 marathoner. He used to work for Oracle. He was part of the Penn Relays when he was in college, Tom McGlynn. And so Tom basically said, hey, I'm going to start a coaching company. Would you guys want to be guinea pigs? So there were these 3 girls and I, and we kind of became guinea pigs. So he basically was out there with these girls, and the girls said, we're running CIM in Sacramento in December of 2000. So I said, hey, I'll also come and run with you guys. So because of all that speed work I was doing, I wound up running CIM, and it was a shock because I wasn't looking at my watch. I was just maintaining an even pace. And I looked at the watch and I said, hey, 25 miles, and it looks like I'll go under 4 hours. So that was my first sub 4-hour marathon. And that started my marathon journey, basically. I said, hey, this is kind of interesting that all that speed work has helped me achieve, not that going below 4 was some seminal achievement. The point was that I trained for something and I got a better time. That was the key. Whether the better time was from 4.5 to 4:07, 4:07 to 3:42. The time itself wasn't important. The decrease in time was important. So I was of the opinion that I'm getting closer and closer to my potential, right? And so in the year 2001, Tom McGlynn launched his company, and I became one of his guinea pigs. And I learned a lot from him. We used to do track workouts in San Mateo, and I had some of my best races, in 2001, 2002. So that started my marathon journey, basically.
Yeah, terrific. And you're someone who's also been responsible for coaching many people, and to complete endurance runs, marathons, ultras. So what has that been like for you? What drives you to do that?
So here is where my coaching started, right? In the year 2000, in the CIM that I'm talking about, I was supposed to run with a dear friend of mine. We were both supposed to run that race, and he was going to run that as his first marathon because he is an Ironman triathlete today. But he used to do triathlons in India, shorter distances. But in this case, he was aiming to run his first Ironman. So as part of the Ironman, the running distance is a marathon. So I said, okay, let's both run, the race. But he wound up falling ill sometime in November around Thanksgiving time. So he didn't recover in time for the race. So I ran that alone. But then I ran with him in the 2001 Napa, which became his first marathon. And I kind of helped him along the way. So I realized that, whatever pleasure I get from running for myself, I get an equal amount, if not more, pleasure by helping someone achieve something in their life, right? Fast forward to later in the year 2001, I had a neighbor when I was living in Milpitas, and that neighbor had just finished running his first ever marathon with a charity called Team Asha. Okay. And so Team Asha back then had one coach. He's a dear friend now. His name is Tony Fong. And so they were looking for a second coach because in that first year, the first 2 years, in the year 2000 and 2001, they had about 30 runners. But now they knew that they were going to get at least 50, 60 runners in 2002. So they were looking for a coach. So he was the one who was heading up the program in 2002. So he asked me, would you You're a people person. Would you come and coach? So I had no idea what the heck coaching entailed, right? All I knew is I'd helped a friend with running, a little bit of running. And so the way my brain operates is, hey, that's a challenge. And if that's a challenge, then I'm going to learn something about the world. I'm going to learn something about me. And
Right.
theoretically, the world is outside. The entire world is technically here, inside of me, right? So this is what I'm going to learn about me, my world, what makes me tick, if I can even do it. Because never having coached, it can be a scary proposition, right? Because what's the biggest thing that happens when you mentor someone? The biggest issue is, what if they ask me something and I don't know the answer? Or if I bluff my way through it and I give them a wrong answer, what if something bad happens? Will I be able to live with that? So basically, I said, anyway, I'll still learn. I'll learn something about me. So I took on that role of as coach of Team Asha in the year 2002, and oh boy, was that one amazing journey! Because in the first few weeks, every time, and you know this for a fact, when you take up some sport, especially a sport that is as high impact as running is probably the highest impact sport. You expose yourself to way more injuries than, say, if you're cycling or you're swimming, right? I had to learn. If someone sent out a question, uh, hey, coach, hey, coaches, this is what's happening to me. I have a pain in the back of my calf. In the beginning, I didn't even know, because remember, I had never had any injuries except for one injury back in 1997 96 when I came down with ITB. I had to learn about ITB. That's the only tendon I knew about and the only muscle I knew about, and that's the only part of the body I knew about, the ITB. But now in 2002, now I was forced to learn about the calf and the quads and the hamstrings. So, and it turned out to be the most beautiful journey, because the one thing I realized, as I told you, is when I'm helping someone, it makes me feel happy, right? Eventually, all of us have that ego inside. So it's about the ego. But over the years, all these years of coaching, that ego has diminished over the years. But in those days, it was a little bit about the ego, I agree. But it was also about learning for myself and passing on that knowledge. Because one of the things I've done over the years is, in my life, I create puzzles, I create quizzes. Whatever I learn, I try to pass that knowledge on to children in my life who've now grown up to be adults. I look forward to my quizzes. So this was a way of learning something and passing it on to someone. I had learned about running. I had learned about the joys of running. I had learned about the highs I got when I was running, and I wanted people to experience that. I had learned that I could go beyond myself. There were times when I could go beyond myself when I was running, and reach areas in my brain, in my body, especially in my mind, that I would never have experienced sitting on the couch. And I wanted other people to experience that and gain confidence in themselves. So my coaching became about empowering others. My coaching became about helping people, especially people who have never, and I'm going to take the example of running, have never run before. Not only that, do not even have the confidence or that feeling that I can do it. They might have had the mental strength, right? They might have had the strength, the fortitude, but somewhere inside of them was that little voice that said, hey, half marathon, no way, you can't do it. I wanted to change that no in their heads to a yes. If a yes to not, how do I put this? A yes to at least attempt, at least try it. I remember standing on the stage in 2002. As I said, I became a coach for Team Asha, and we had the gathering where you have people sign up because they come to ask questions. So it's an info session. I remember standing over there, and I said, and someone brought it back to me last year because he was inspired by what I had said. He reminded me of what I had said. I'd forgotten about it. I said, I want to make running the fastest growing religion. I remember saying this, and I didn't realize that how many people it had an impact on, but it surely had an impact on the one person who reminded me of that last year. And As you know, a religion has to be all inclusive, right? In this case, it wasn't just about elite runners. It wasn't just about the fast runners. It wasn't about someone who wants to go or is able to do a 3:15, 3 hour, 2:50, 3:45 marathon. I wanted to help those people who go and do a 6 and a 7 hour marathon, because trust me on this, he was one of the most famous marathoners of all time, Frank Shorter, the last American to win an Olympic gold medal in the marathon in 1972, who said the ones who are at the back are the ones who are doing the hardest work, right? The ones who are finishing in 4 hours and 5 hours and 6 hours. They're the ones who are working way harder than we are. Well, that was his opinion. I get the feeling, I suspect it might be pretty true, because if the longer you take in a marathon, the more the impact on your body. Someone who's running at 5 minutes mile pace, his stride length is probably going to be 3, 4, 5 feet, spend a lot of time in the air. The number of footsteps is far lower than somebody whose stride length is 2.5 feet. It's taking way more steps to cover the same distance both people are covering. So my thing was to make it an all-inclusive thing. I wanted people to dream big, and realize that in dreaming big, there was help for them to translate that dream into reality. All they had to do was find someone. And I wanted to be that someone. I wanted to be that someone to help them not only dream big, but also to change that dream into a reality, into an achievement. Let me give you a small example. 2004, Team Asha, my third year as coach. I was working in Oracle at that time, and my closest friend, I had a group of 3 or 4 people, was a person who weighed 215 pounds. And the info session was sometime in the month of, let's say, March or April. And sometime in February or even in March, I said, "Hey, dude, why don't you come and join the marathon program?" Right? So he goes, "Ha ha ha, take a look at me. I'm 215 pounds. I can't even walk 3 miles. What are you talking about?" I said, "Look, dude, you have the advantage no other runner in that group has. Your coach will be sitting in the next cubicle. Your coach will be sitting in the next cubicle. That's the biggest advantage you have. Just join the program. Nobody's asking you to run it." Because the first philosophy I have is cover the distance. It doesn't matter if you can run all of it or walk all of it. Cover the distance, right? So I said, no one's telling you to go run the whole thing. You can walk part of it, you can walk all of it. So he got inspired. Make a long story short, this person was one of the shyest people you'll ever meet. When we were among strangers, he would be in one corner just standing over there. I would have to pull him in and introduce him to the people. I swear to you, 1 year later, after he had finished the Maui Marathon in 2004, he used to walk up to people and say, "Hey, I'm this." What a transformation. He went from 215 pounds to 185 pounds. His confidence skyrocketed.
Yep.
He has gone on now to go, he has gone climbing in the Himalayas and stuff, trekking in the Himalayas and stuff. Hats off to him. He said
Perfect.
yes. He said yes to a dream that someone gave him, and he ran with it.
No,
So
totally.
that is my philosophy in coaching. I want to make running the fastest growing religion. I want it to be the most inclusive thing ever, not just elites. I can help elites also if I need to, the faster runners. As I was telling you the other day, my philosophy is no runner left behind. I will be with the first people and the last people.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's how my coaching has evolved over the years. Because in when you coach someone, Santosh, or when you're mentoring your child, for example, there are two aspects to it, especially when it comes to
So,
physical
so
activity like running.
before you proceed, I think there's a lot of gold that you just shared, right? There's a lot of gold. Couple of things that I want to call out. One, I think you shared about the fact that your whole coaching journey itself was a step in a zone of uncomfortable zone. It was a zone that you're not familiar with. And one thing I want to call out is that whole mindset of you know getting into that zone with the intention that end of the day it leaves you a better person than you were before. So that's a great mindset that I want to call out. And the other
Thank
thing
you.
that you mentioned, right, is the whole idea behind helping and sharing your knowledge to help people get to a finish line. Because I completely agree with you that running kind of mimics life in a way, and
It does.
I kind of I've experienced that as well. And I do mentor some groups. I've mentored some groups, and the joy of seeing someone finish a half marathon or a
Oh,
marathon when they thought that they could never do it,
yes.
it's a life changing event. It's
It's
life changing.
indescribable.
And
It
like you
is.
said, this guy you example that you gave, I mean, there must be scores out there whose life just altered, their view of themselves and view of what's possible completely altered.
Agreed, Santosh, because all these years of coaching, more so lately, um, every time I watch them go across the finish line and they jump up in joy, I get choked up. I get all choked up because it's not they haven't done that because of me.
Yeah.
They've not done it because of me. I've just been someone who contributed a little bit to that success. They have done it because of themselves. They had to move those feet. They had to find that courage within. They had to find that motivation within. And that can only come when you go out on the edge. You tell yourself, I am willing to be uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
I want to do this in life, whether it's running or a project at work, it doesn't matter. When you're in an uncomfortable place, you can either say, I will not fight today, or you say, I will fight today. Not fighting today is okay because not every battle has to be won. Not every fight has to be seen through to the end. As
No,
in
makes
training.
sense. Total sense. Makes total sense. And I'm sure that also has helped your journey into ultra running, which I want to kind of maybe get
Sure.
back into. Um, so I think where we were regarding in regards to your own personal journey was you completed those half marathons, and but you're known to have completed a lot of pretty tough ultra marathons. So where did ultras enter your life? When did you decide to say 26.2 both? Enough of 26.2s. Let's do something more.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. I this was 2005, and I had been coaching Team Asha for whatever 2002, 3, 4, and 5, so 4 years. And a friend, dear friend Anil Rao, who I had coached in 2003 to his first marathon, he signed up for a local race, and it's in a park that has become my favorite park over the years. I do a lot of my running in that park. The Quicksilver 50K. In those days, there were only two distances in that race. Even today, there are only two distances, but they're two different distances. Back then, it was a 50K, 50 miler. So he said, Rajeev, I'm doing the Quicksilver 50K. Do you want to run with me? I said, sure. So I signed up. I said, oh, it's a 50K. It's only 5 more miles, right? 26.2, 31.07. So 5 more miles. Um, I had never been to that park before. I actually had been to that park before once for about a 15-mile run, but that was way back in 2001, 2002. So I'd forgotten about it. So I started the race. And if nothing else, one of the things I've realized over the years when I run races, um, I'm a social creature. I connect with people all the time. So here I am running this race, and I didn't know too many people in that race because um, this was my first ultra, right? Until then, I'd been doing nothing but races on the road. So I didn't know anybody in that race, and a whole bunch of mainly Caucasian people running in the race. But I got to connect to people. I met some people who became my dearest friends, like Carol Cumanal, who had run the Miwok 100K the weekend before. She was running Quicksilver that day, and then she was going to run the Ohlone 50K the weekend after. And I said, holy cow, you ran 100K, 62 miles last weekend. She was doing the 50 miler that day in Quicksilver, if I remember right. You're doing a 50 miler today, and now you're going to do a Ohlone 50K. So I hadn't even heard of the Miwok, or I hadn't heard of Ohlone. All I knew is this Quicksilver race I'm doing. But anyway, I finished that race, socializing along the way, talking to people in the aid stations, making friends. And then I said, hey, this 50K thing is not bad, man. I get to, run slowly. I don't have to go run fast. I don't have to run with anybody. I can just run on my own, enjoy these beautiful trails. That was in the month of May. In June, I signed up for a 50K up in the hills here behind me. I ran that 50K. I signed up for another 50K in August. I ran that in Marin County. And then in the meantime, Anil said, hey, by the way, I'm also doing a 50 miler in Helen Klein 50 miler in November. Do you want to run it? I said, look, I don't want to run 50 miles on the road. These are my exact words. I asked him like 3-4 times. You're telling me it's on a bike path. Is there a shoulder that I can run on? That's dirt. He goes, yeah. And I didn't really believe him, but I said, chalo, theek hai. That's fine. Let's go. So I signed up and I ran, and there indeed was a shoulder. So I ran on the shoulder. And I had the time of my life. I had no idea what the hell 50 miles was all about, but I had the time of my life because I had a phenomenal race. It was a mostly flat course, but I remember running 10 hours and 10 minutes for that 50 miler. And when I finished, back in those days, the Western States 100 miler, which I was starting to hear about because people used to say, oh, you're running Helen Klein. That's a Western States qualifier. I said, okay, what's this Western States? So I looked up and it was a 100-mile race. So someone said, hey, you ran 10 hours, 10 minutes. You've gone under 11 hours. It's a qualifier for Western States. Now it's no longer a qualifier. Qualifying conditions have become very stringent now. Yeah. But back in those days, even that flat 50 miler was a qualifier. So I said, oh, wow, okay, fine. Anyway, so that was my first 50 miler. But the race director who put on that 50 miler, Helen Klein's husband, Norm Klein, who used to be the one-time race director of Western States, of Napa, he said, he first serenaded me with a Hindi song because he had learned a Hindi song. So he sang a Hindi song for me at the end of the race. I forget what song. It was a Raj Kapoor song. Ina Mina Dika. I think it was Raj Kapoor or whoever it was. Ina Mina Dika, because he used to be he was a doctor, and he had a roommate who was Indian who taught him that song. So I said, wow, this guy is pretty cool. Hey, Rajeev, I have a 100-mile race next year, August. Do you want to sign up? So I was euphoric. I was, on a high. I just finished a 50 miler. I said, yeah, baby, I'm coming. So in March of that next year, I sent in my application, not even thinking about this 100-mile thing, right? It's far away. It's far away in time. I have time, whatever it is. I'll look into it. But suddenly it dawned on me after I sent it in a few weeks later, hey, dude, I signed up for a 100-mile race. So what do I do now? So I quickly signed up for the Miwok 100K because, it was open back in those days. Now it's become a lottery. So I ran the Miwok 100K. I was the second to last person to finish. I finished in the dark. That race starts at the most funniest time, 5:40 in the morning. I finished at some 9, 10 o'clock at night, 15 hours and some odd minutes. But that gave me my mental thing was, it took me 15 hours to do 62 miles. So, okay, if I extrapolate, I should be able to run 100 miles in under 30 hours. Secondly, the most important thing was simply this, that at the end of those 62.15 miles, I wasn't feeling tired. Okay.
Wow.
No, I wasn't feeling. So my mindset was, hey, I'm not feeling tired, right? So this 100-mile thing can be done, right? But there was still that trepidation and fear that, geez, 62 miles and I still have another 38 miles to go. I'm not tired now, but what's to say I won't get tired at 70 miles or 80 miles? Then what happens to me? What do I do, right? So towards that end, I started reading. I got the seminal book on ultra running. It's a massive compendium of articles and by famous ultra runners and everything. So I started digging into ultra marathon. Let's call it ultra marathon race reports and knowledge. But there were few and far between, especially the race I was going to run, Rio del Lago. But what I realized is those race reports were helping me. So I, in turn, had to do something to give back to that world out there. So in my case, I wanted to turn my race reports, because these people had race reports as some email somewhere or something. I turned it into a blog. Okay. I turned my race reports into a blog for two reasons. Number one, in the future, if I went back to read my blog, I would remember things about a race that I might have forgotten, because life happens. Your brain gets rid of neurons it doesn't need, replaces with other memories. And the most important thing was, if there's someone out there like me who's looking for information about a race or anything else, they would find it on my blog. So that's how my blog came about. But to make a long story short, one of my research things had said, you know what, let's do a 24-hour run and see how it goes. And I chose to do it exactly a month, or a little over a month before the Rio del Lago race. So I did that in July of 2006. I started at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, and July is a hot, hot month. This is like in the third week of July. And I had created a spreadsheet with people to come and pace us. So Anil Rao was helping me because Anil Rao was going to be my crew chief in the race. So he and I ran. We went through an entire hot day. So basically, this was an effort to learn about what it takes to go through a hot day, what food I can eat, what kind of hydration I need to take care of, and what it feels like to get into a night after running an entire day in the heat. And it was hot as heck. It wasn't about miles, it was just about learning. It was about spending time on my feet. So we probably wound up doing, I want to say 62 miles, 64 miles in 24 hours. But that was such a vital learning experience. It was just an amazing learning experience.
And these were the
So
days
fast.
when these were the days, I think today if somebody wants to run a 100 miler, there's like books, there's
Oh my God,
Google it.
there's so much information.
Yeah.
There's
These
so
were
much
the days.
information.
Yeah.
For me, when I was looking, there was nothing.
Nothing.
There was hardly anything. Okay, so let's put it this way. There was a lot of information about 100 miles, nutrition and stuff, but there was no information about a South Asian vegetarian runner. A South Asian vegetarian runner. That's very important.
Yeah.
The only other person back then who was doing ultra marathons, he's become a friend now, was Natu Natraj. He had done Badwater 135. And so I finally got to meet him in 2007 in the Lean Horse 100 miler. And we connected and we actually finished the race together. So I became the guinea pig. I became my own guinea pig, and I wound up becoming a guinea pig for people who came after me, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's very clear. But I do have a quick, something to ask you in this regard before we proceed further into your ultra journey. When you move from a half marathon to a 50K to 50 mile and 100K, you also made a statement saying you didn't feel very tired. What do you think you attribute that to? I mean, it's very surprising because for most people, running those distances is daunting physically and mentally, but you seem to have kind of just walked into it and evolved. So is it, you think it is genetic? Is it, or were you doing something unconsciously that helped you to be such a strong endurance runner?
That is a fantastic question, because I was going to segue into this later, but that is a very, very good question. And I'm going to spend 5 minutes talking about something that you may or may not be aware of. Okay. So the one thing I realized over the years, especially when I was running ultras, the one thing I realized is I discovered this inadvertently. And then I found out later on that what I was doing has a name to it, has some science behind it. So the one thing I think I benefited from doing all those runs in the beginning when I wasn't training for any races. I was just going out and running idiotic distances, 20 miles, 22 miles, just for the pure love of running. I would just go out, spend 2 hours running 20 miles, 22 miles, whatever the case may be. So the one thing I realized is when I was, and that came to help me in my races. Now, I'm going to introduce something. I don't know if you're aware of this. There's something called the central governor theory. Have you heard of the central governor theory?
No.
To make a long story short, there's a guy called Tim Noakes, South African. Okay, he's written a seminal book on running. It's called The Lore of Running. He's also written another book called Waterlogged. It came out some years ago. Tim Noakes is a doctor. Tim Noakes was running one of the most famous ultra marathons of all time. It's called the Comrades, right? It runs from Pietermaritzburg to Durban one year, and the following year, Durban to Pietermaritzburg. So he was going along great guns. He's a great runner himself. He was going along great guns. He was having a blast. He was feeling awesome. And he knew he was going to get a personal best, a PR that day. Okay. And because he knew that I only have like 10 miles left or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact numbers. He turned a corner. And he saw a hill. The minute he saw the hill, his body was instantly, his brain and his body gave up. And he felt instant fatigue. Okay, he did finish the race that day, but it didn't turn out to be a PR. So he wanted to find out what the heck happened to me. I turned that corner. What happened to me? What actually happened? Why did someone switch off the power? There's a Japanese person who, along with him, started exploring this. They realized that there were people who, in a marathon, half marathon, especially the longer the distance, the more these occurrences happen. They would be at mile 20, 22, looking dead. It's like they're about to die. And then they would see the finish line and they would start sprinting, like there was, like nothing had happened before, as though they just started the race. So they were wondering what's going on, and it turned out to be something called the central governor theory. Until then, the research doctors would say that the brain has very little to do with running. Okay, they realized that the brain is the central governor. The brain is responsible for maintaining homeostasis, keeping you alive. And when it is faced with a task, it allocates certain. I'm talking about running in this example, but it could be cycling also or anything. Running, for example, it allocates muscle motor units, certain amount in its estimation based on all the previous runs you've done in your life. Every run is stored in the brain, by the way, for your information. The distance, the temperature, the muscle motor units used. So if you're doing a distance that you've never run before, your brain will try and estimate. Okay. And that's what they realized. So that's what I had been doing. I had been recruiting. My brain. Here's another thing I used to do when I used to go running like this on my own. If I saw a hill and it looked daunting, I would run up the hill, because my philosophy was, if that hill is scaring me right now, I will. That fear is not the hill. The fear is that I'm not good enough. That the fear is a fear in my mind that I have to conquer. It's a mountain in my mind. That hill is just a hill. I can walk it. Nothing prevents me from walking it. So I was doing that even when I was doing my runs all by myself. So that came and helped me in my races. So in my races, and I'm not boasting, I'm not lying, I have been tired and I've summoned enough reserves through races at 40 miles, at 50 miles, at 120 miles, right? I've summoned enough resources. If you go read my blog, you'll realize the GUCR at 120 miles. In order to make a cutoff, I've run 8 and 9 and 10-minute miles. When, before that I was walking because, my blood sugar was low, or, I just was out of it. But I'm able to do that almost at will. And so that's what I'm saying, that if I'm able to do that, and if my brain has been trained enough to be able to do that, I usually do not feel tired at the end of races. And I've realized that, and that's something that I discovered accidentally, because in my head that hill is a beast, but the beast is inside of me, not there. And that's something that I used to coach and tell people today, and it's become one of the mantras of all the people I've coached: make hills your friends. Make hills your friend. That's one of the things.
Again, gold there, right? But what I want to really call out is, I think I see a certain pattern in what you're speaking in the last 45 minutes, and that pattern is to do with embracing discomfort and going out of the comfort zone. Right?
Thank you. Well said.
Right, and you mentioned that regarding your training. You mentioned that regarding your coaching, journey, and you also seem to allude that to your own running. Because you're right, the first impression looking at a hill is discomfort, and the whatever the parasympathetic, sympathetic
Yes.
nervous systems are working to make you just survive, so you preserve energy. But that's a great mindset, Rajeev. I'm making mental note, and hopefully the viewers who are listening to this can make a quick mental note. And
so Santosh, when I coach, I do that. When I coach, I take people on runs, And the first thing they'll ask me is, Coach, how many miles are we running today? I'll tell them, I have no idea. I'm waiting for divine knowledge to come down into my head. And then I'll take them running, and suddenly there's a hill, and I'll tell them we're running up that hill. So they'll go, no. I'll say, yes. Then we get to the top of the hill. I'll tell them we're going down the hill again, running it up again. So I make it up on the fly. It's called brain training. You have to be outside your comfort zone. You have to train your brain. The brain is a subconscious brain that you have to train to say that, look, the conscious brain, I'm the conscious brain. I'm telling you we are okay. We are comfortable. We're not going to die. And you can train it to the point where now you see a hill, say, dude, it's mano a mano.
Yeah. Absolutely. Beautiful and terrific. So coming back to your own ultra running journey, you've now hit the 100-mile mark, and you've done 100K, and you're heading to the 100-mile mark. Let's go for it. What happened in the 100 mile, the first 100 mile? How did that go?
So I started the race, and all my research, whatever research I had done, was let's walk the first mile. First 10 minutes, 15 minutes, mile, 3/4 of a mile. So I was walking. And I happened to be walking with a girl called Carmela Layson, who was being coached by someone who's become a friend now, a zombie runner, owner of a store called Zombie Runner, Don and Jillian Lundell. So Carmela and I were talking, and we walked a bit, and then she took off. I started running, and basically I had a whole bunch of pacers. We were allowed pacers from 62 miles, right? And so it was a loop going north and then a loop going south. So that loop going north was 62 miles. The loop south was 38 miles. So I went off running. My crew people were there at different points. So I was feeling comfortable, right? I was walking the hills, running the flats, running the downhills. And there were some pretty bad hills going, there actually is a hill there. At the bottom of it, it says very, very, very steep hill. But people who live in that area in Auburn have given it a name. They call it K2. You know what K2 is, right?
Yeah. The
At
Himalayan K2?
The
Himalayan K2? Yeah.
The Karakoram range, K2, 28,250 feet, the second highest mountain in the world, supposedly the most dangerous mountain. It's in Pakistan. So they call it K2. So K2, that K2 was a hard climb. It was 7 slopes with some false flats. Oh man, it came at some horrible time. It was hot as heck. But when I reached the Cool Fire Station, the first thing, and by now Carmela was with me, and another person named Jakob was with me. So the 3 of us. So I told these 2 people, look, it's hot as heck. It's a 9-mile loop, this Olmsted loop. I'm going to walk the whole thing because it's very hot right now. I'm going to walk the whole thing. By the time we finish, it'll be a little cooler. Then I'll start running. So they said, okay. So the 3 of us are walking the loop up and down rolling hills. We come back, get back to 45 miles. And then my first pacer kind of starts pacing with me. We reach 62 miles. I'm feeling great. I'm half an hour before the cutoff. So the cutoff was 1:30 in the morning. I reach at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'm fine. I change into my running shoes. And Anil Rao was pacing me from there. So Anil and I are walking along, talking. And we were so happy talking that we missed a turn off to the right. And so we're going. And suddenly we don't see any more signs, trail signs. We look back. We see a headlamp of Barbara Elia, green one. She had a green headlamp. Green headlamps are best for dirt conditions at night. They make dirt easier to spot. She veered off to her right, which is our left when we're looking back. I said, Anil, shit, why is she going there? So we have to run back now. So we ran back, and in the process, we lost about 12 minutes of the buffer I had. I had a 30-minute buffer. So now Anil says, boss, this is bad. We're only 30 minutes ahead, and now we've already lost 10, 15 minutes. So now he was on high alert. He had to monitor all the trail signs. I had to monitor the trail signs. To make a long story short, I wound up running like crazy from mile 76 to, or 73, 74 to mile 80. I had to put on the afterburners, so to speak. By that, I don't mean 6 and 7 and 8 minute miles. By that, I mean 9, 9:30, 10 pace. But that is afterburners at 76 miles. Okay. So I put on the afterburners. I made it to the aid station. And that aid station I reached at 6:30 or whatever the time was. I forget the time. But the aid station volunteer goes, hey, come on, come on. You still have 4 more miles to go before you come back here. And you only have this much time. And I'm thinking, the cheat sheet didn't told us we have more time. But I said, what the heck? I have to run some more. So here I am running some more, running some more, running some more. I finally made it back in time, made it back to the 92-mile aid station with enough time to spare. And the philosophy of the race director was that if you make it back to the 90-mile aid station, then it's okay, if you finish the race beyond 30 miles. So my 30 hours. So my goal was I have to make it to 90 miles, right, in time. Then the last 10 miles, even if I finish in 30 hours, 10 minutes, Norm is going to let it slide and give me a result. So I was happy. So Anu started pacing me then. And I started shuffling a bit, and my Achilles tendon started hurting. So I said, hey, I'm going to walk it now because there's no hurry. Couple of miles into it, 2.5 miles into it, or maybe at about 94 miles, I said, Anu, let's see if I can run. So given all the knowledge I'd acquired over the years, coaching people, anatomy, I said, if I put my foot a little differently, it'll minimize that pain. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, I put my foot a little differently. There was no pain. I started running. And I ran all the way to the finish. So that race, and I cried. I cried at 97 miles because I remembered my mother telling me 2 days before the race that, son, whatever you set your mind to, you've always done in your life, so you will have success in the race. And when I got to 97 miles, I knew I was going to finish. Until then, of course, I knew I was going to finish, but until then, my aim was to finish in under 30 hours. I didn't want that grace 5, 10 minutes or 15 minutes.
Consolation.
So, that consolation thingy, right? I wanted to do it well. So to make a long story short, at 97 miles, Anil Rao and Rajeev Char, and they were all waiting there. And Anil looks at the watch and he goes, hey, you can make it. You can make it under 29 hours. So I looked at the thing and I said, okay, I'll try. So my Achilles tightened up a bit. I started running. It hurt. I told Anu, back off. We've run a little. We have enough time. Forget the 29 hours. But again, I put my foot a little differently. I started running again. And I wound up finishing in, I think it was 28:39 or something, 28:39 or something to that effect. So that was a very satisfying race, an extremely satisfying race.
Well, congratulations.
And I was surrounded by all the people I'd coached over the years. They came at 6 in the morning. They left the Bay Area at 4, 5, 6 in the morning. And if you look at a picture, maybe it's on my blog, I'm not sure. That's just a small portion of the people who came. Some people left soon after, but I was surrounded by at least 8, 9, 10 people who had helped me through the race, crewed me, come to cheer me, all kinds with their little kids and everything. It was just a party, man. It's a big party.
Guruji is finishing 100 miles.
Guruji is finishing 100 miles. Exactly. That's true. Coach. That's amazing. Coach, that's amazing. And here I am, basically I have not bathed in like 32 hours and, looking bedraggled and, stinking. But they were so kind. They were standing next to me and holding their breaths, but they were standing next to me.
Yeah, amazing. That's beautiful.
It was beautiful. It was a great experience.
That's beautiful. And so that was your beginning, and you've gone on to do many other interesting races. I think Spartathalon was another one that you mentioned.
So basically, I went up to run Lean Horse in 2007 because I wanted to get out of my comfort zone. Most of my 100 milers were here in California. I wanted to get out of my comfort zone, no crew, nothing. And when I reached South Dakota, I realized how much outside my comfort zone I was. The only cell phone provider there was Verizon. I had AT&T. I did not have signal for for 40 hours or 2 days. I had no signal. I felt lonely. I felt like, geez, I'm cut off from all my friends, my family. But I did run the race, and that's where I hooked up with Natu. We ran the last 20 miles together. Well, the last 10 miles together. I passed him a bunch of times in the race, and then he caught up with me at 92 miles, and we did the last 8 miles together. We walked because he was hurting, I was hurting. We walked and we finished. But in 2008, I'd created a group on Yahoo called Ultraholics, like alcoholics, ultraholics. And one of the people who joined that group was Christian Horace. He's a dear, dear friend now. He has the most number of marathons today. He's approaching 3,000 marathons
Wow.
lifetime. And so he sent out a information about a new race that was happening in June, end of June 2009, called the Thames Ring 250 miler. And so I wrote to the race directors as soon as I saw that. I wrote to the race directors, said, look, I've done 600 milers. I want to sign up for this race. They said, oh, yeah, you're the perfect candidate. Please sign up. I signed up for the race, ordered the maps. When the maps came, and I opened the maps. These are beautiful maps from the UK. I saw all these places along the route. I saw, where they had toilets and all that. I was so excited because some of those places were places I read about when I was growing up as a kid, reading Enid Blyton books. And I said, now I'm going to get a chance to go to these places, see what they look like. So anyway, to make a long story short, I started that race June of 2009. And I got to 183 miles, checkpoint number 7. There were 10 checkpoints. I had not slept for 65 hours because my plan was to sleep at 135 miles, to stay awake until that checkpoint, which meant going through an entire day. The race started at 10 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday. Go through Wednesday, run through Wednesday night. Thursday night is when I was planning to sleep at 135 miles. In those days, I used to rely on Ensure and Excel gel. That was the only gel in those days that had protein, but it also had caffeine, and I had forgotten that it had caffeine. So I was staying awake using my gels and, using my caffeine pills now and then. But that night, when I got to the 135-mile checkpoint, 132, 35, I forget, whatever the heck it was, I just couldn't sleep. I reached there with 3.5 hours to go before closing time for the checkpoint, but I just couldn't sleep. And I was thinking, what the heck? I took my last caffeine pill like 7, 8, 9 hours ago just to make sure, that I'd get some sleep, but I just couldn't sleep. I was in the back of a car lying down, and for 3 hours, I just lay awake. So I said, forget it now. It's time to go. I left the checkpoint and I started running. So by the time I got to 183 miles, I had only 12 minutes left, and the race director would not let us even stay 30 seconds out, beyond the checkpoint closing time. And I was wet. My headlamp had no batteries. There was dying. I was wet. I had to change out of my clothes. I had to get some gels, food. 12 minutes. I said, I'm done. I sat down and I went to sleep. Anyway. So a month later, I found out that that checkpoint was actually closing an hour later than 2 o'clock in the morning. It was 3 o'clock, but it was my mistake for not asking. Because the race director had said in the previous checkpoint, 27 miles before that it's closing at 2. And we argued with him, but we had to leave that checkpoint, so we left. Anyway, from that day on, my motto became, every time I come to a checkpoint, if I'm close to the cutoff, I'm going to ask, what time is this checkpoint closing? What time is the next one closing? So that I make it in time. Because of that 2009 Thames Ring 250 miler, I knew I was going to go back to that race again. So I had to come to terms, to grips, or to accept the fact that there was a section called the Grand Union Canal, which ends in London, starts in Birmingham, or goes beyond Birmingham also. That section was unlike the Thames Ring section. So I had to come to terms and grips with that section. I didn't like it very much in the Thames Ring 250 miler. So I signed up for the GUCR 145 the next year in 2010 to run it, just so that I could get used to that. So I could go back and the Thames Ring was held every other year. So I could go back in 2011 to run the Thames Ring and kick ass. So I ran the GUCR 2010 145 miler. I finished. It was a beautiful race. probably the only race where there are videos, because Anu and two other girls came with me. They were my crew, and they took videos of me at various points. So that's the only race I have video coverage. But guess what happened? I fell in love with the GUCR course. It became, even to this day, even if I don't go back to run the race, I was supposed to go back now. It's happening at the end of May, but I'm not going because of the pandemic. UK is still coming out of the pandemic. The race is being held, but I don't want to go there, be quarantined, have to come back. I don't want to get that thing. I'll do it next year probably. So that became the race I loved the most. So I went back in 2011, 2012, and 13. But when I finished it in 2010, back in those days, even today, it's still a qualifier for the Spartathlon. One of the qualifying conditions is any race of 200 kilometers or longer that you finish in the allotted time. So since this race was 145 miles or 227 or 30 kilometers, and I qualified to run the Spartathlon. So I knew I was going to run it in 2011. So towards that end, Natu himself had qualified to run for the Spartathlon because of his bad water finishes. So in 2010, Natu ran the Spartathlon, and he asked me to be his crew along with Karen, who now is his wife. So the two of us crewed him, and he's a dear friend. Even if I was not running the Spartathlon the following year, I would still have gone out to help him, because you help a friend. I was in Europe anyway on a vacation in Barcelona. I had gone back to England to run the South Downs Way 100-miler. I got lost at 56 miles. I went along a different path. I was supposed to go along the South Downs Way path, and I went along a horse bridle path by mistake, and I wound up 3 miles away from the aid station. So I was in Europe anyway. So I went to Greece. Now, this time around, because I was running the next year, I wanted to study the course. I got to know the race director. We became friends. And so when I landed up in 2011 to run the Spartathlon, it was one of the greatest events of my life. Even though I didn't finish the race, that doesn't matter. It's come to the point where finishing races doesn't matter. But imagine you're standing on the Acropolis. Above you is the Parthenon. It's still lit up. The moon is up there. The race starts at 7. It's 5:30, 5:45 in the morning. You hear so many different languages. 300 participants from the two biggest contingents come from Germany and Japan. And you have 36 hours to finish, to run 153 miles from Athens to Sparta. This is, according to historians, this is the most likely route that Phidippides ran in 490 BC, when he ran from Athens to Sparta to ask for help when the Persians landed in the Bay of Marathon. So it was goosebumps time, because whether it really was the actual race path or not, because obviously 2,500 years have changed a lot, but to run in the echo of Phidippides' footsteps was the most beautiful feeling. It's indescribable.
So what happened?
Running through Athens.
What happened? You said you didn't finish it. What happened?
So central governor theory at play again, my friend.
Tell us about it.
The 50-mile cutoff in the Spartathlon is 9 hours and 30 minutes. It's only been relaxed once in the last 10 years. In the second year that I ran it in 2012, it was an extremely hot year. They actually relaxed it to 10 hours because it was very hot. It was 95, 100 degrees or something. And I basically stopped at 32 miles. California that year wasn't even hot in the summer. And suddenly Greece was hot. But in 2011, my fastest 50 milers were in Helen Klein, right? 10:10 the first year in 2005. And 2006, I ran a 9:49, right? After that, all my trail 150 milers, well, I take it back. Some of my fastest 50 milers, besides Helen Klein, were in American River. My fastest American River was a 10:10. That was my last year that I ran the American River 50 miler. I ran it 5 years in a row, 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10. In 2010, I had one of the greatest races I've ever had. I ran in 10 hours, 10 minutes. Phenomenal. I mean, the last 19, 20 miles, I was just flying. I was flying. But I'm thinking to myself, AR50 is a hilly course. I ran 10 hours, 10 minutes. Helen Klein in 2006, years ago, 5 years before the Spartathalon, was a 9:49. It was a flat course. How the heck am I going to do a 9:49, 9:30 at the Spartathlon, given that it's reasonably hilly? The people say it's not very hilly, but it's actually hilly. It runs along the coast, and there are some pretty crappy hills. So that was my biggest fear. How am I going to make it to 9.5 hours in the 50 miles? Because after that, the cutoffs start relaxing a little bit. So the central governor theory, my brain said, I'm going to give you 50 miles because all you're asking for is 50 miles. I got 50 miles. I did it in 9:09, right? My fastest ever 50 miler. I reached 62 miles in my fastest ever 100K time of whatever, 10 and a half, 11 hours, 10 and a half hours or something, 11 hours. But my brain had allotted enough to give me what I wanted because I had not focused on 100 miles or 150 miles. I had only focused on 50 miles. My brain gave me 50 miles. Here's your gift. Now goodbye. So I eventually timed out at 70 miles.
So how do you deal with situations like this when you intend to go out and do something and you're not able to finish? How do you deal with something like that? Emotionally, does it affect you emotionally?
No.
No.
The only one that affected me emotionally was the Thames Ring 250 miler. Only because I gave up. I did not ask. I should have made sure that it did close at 2 o'clock. I'd argued with him in the previous aid station 27 miles before that. I should have asked again, are you sure it's closing at 2 o'clock? Had I done that, he would have said, oh, I'm so sorry. Christian and Javed Bhatti came in 12 minutes before you, and I confirmed with them it's closing at 3, so you are good till 3. If I had done that, I know I would have finished the 250 miler. That was the only time I felt emotionally. I was very hard on myself for 2 or 3 weeks. It was Anu. It was Anu who helped me a lot. She sent me this quote by Neil Donald Walsh, and I'm paraphrasing. The voice of caution knows nothing of real joy. For what joy is there in doing that which you could? Try something you could fail at. That might just be living, right? That phrase finally. So after 3 weeks and feeling my disappointment, I realized one thing. And that has always been the motto of my life, especially after that in many races. That when I am hard on myself and I'm disappointed with myself, I am being disrespectful to that Rajeev who had the time of his life running 183 miles. I used to walk into aid stations cheerful. In fact, that newsletter that came 3 months later, they said Rajiv was the personality of the Thames Ring. We were very surprised when he stopped at 183 miles. I come into aid stations, I'm cheerful. It doesn't matter if I'm 130 miles into the race or even 183 miles. Even when I came into the 183 miles, I was still talking. I was socializing. But I stopped in that race. I cannot be disrespectful of that Rajiv who had the time of his life in 183 miles. I went back in 2013 to run the Thames Ring, and I had severe hamstring issues at 105 miles. I stopped at 105 miles, partly also because of something that I wound up getting, an IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, that began in 2013 at the same time. It's called Crohn's disease. So that was also contributing to my stopping at 105 miles. But ever since then, it's just a race. It doesn't define who I am. What defines who I am is how I handle failures. Success is easily handled by every human being. A failure, and I put it in quotes, because if I can learn something from that stopping or not finishing what I started out doing, then I have gained something. I've succeeded to some extent. It's not a failure. It's a learning lesson. So I that was the one race where I was hard on myself, with myself on myself. But ever since then, I don't finish a race. So be it. I live to fight another day.
Stride. Yeah.
Yeah, I live to fight another day.
Yep. And I think what I'm hearing also is that, you know, your whole approach is that you want to take whatever, if you did 180 miles out of the 250 miles, or if it was
Mhm.
105 miles or 150 miles, you do not want to disrespect the 105 miles you actually did,
No,
right? And
no,
that's what's
no.
giving you the ability to look at it from that point of view,
And put it
rather
in
than focus
perspective.
on the
Yeah.
right.
Yes,
And
I
that's
agree.
what gives you the power to keep going on, and
Yes.
not kind of
Yes,
succumb to, oh, I couldn't do this, make
I
it mean
agree.
something about you,
Yes.
and not do anything in the future, right? And that's what I'm
Yes.
hearing in what you're saying.
And the motto of my life has been, in general, my motto has been, okay, people agree with me, don't agree with me, it doesn't matter to me. The way I live my life is, this moment is as beautiful as it's going to be, because this is the only moment I know, given the choices I've made in my life,
Yeah.
every single moment that preceded this moment. For me to want this moment to be any other way doesn't make sense. This is the only way. In this moment, I quit because I didn't have the time, I didn't have the courage, I didn't have the motivation, I was hurting. It doesn't matter. This is the only Rajiv I know in this moment. And I have to accept the fact that there are times when Rajiv will be fearful. 2008 Tahoe Rim Trail 100. I had a pacer with me. My stomach was kind of iffy. That pacer wasn't doing well. I had to go with that pacer for another 10 miles before that pacer would quit and then go off with her brother. And I lost my motivation, because I realized, if my stomach is not doing well, I also have to handle my pacer who's not doing well, because I could not leave that pacer behind in the tent. This tent was on top of a mountain, no way for that pacer to get back except by walking in one direction, my direction. So I just came back and I quit in that thing. And I told the race people that I need to get out of here. They would not have taken the pacer out for many hours, but because I was a runner, they took me out in a couple of hours. I had to accept the fact that I stopped because of fear that I would not be good enough to handle my own stomach issues, and my pacer is getting so tired that she would not be able to move.
Yeah, yeah.
You give up, you
I
give
want to
up.
call out some gold here, right? And which is, ultra runners are made of flesh and blood, are human beings,
That's
not
correct.
from another planet. And,
No.
and the reason I'm calling this out for the viewers is, a lot of people who may have just started their running journey, or they'll be doing half marathons, who may have completed a couple of full marathons, will be looking at people like you who do this amazing distances and amazing races, and looking at, I mean, they must be genetically different, or whatever, right? But what I'm hearing in your story is, there's so much humanity in it. There is failure, there is struggle, there is bouncing back. And there are times when you don't do as good as you want to. Sometimes you make
Mhm.
mistakes, even in spite of all the biggest experiences and planning. You make mistakes, but you still come back, reframe, get back. And that's what makes ultra runners who you are. And that's a very powerful mindset. And for folks who are listening to this, who are afraid to take that one step to just finish a full marathon, I just want to reflect on what you're saying and say, hey, take it easy, go make those commitments. It's not end of the world. Worst
No,
case,
it's not.
it would be another time, you can try again.
It's not. In the beginning, I used to look at my watch. When I used to run, I used to maintain a running journal, because in the beginning, when I used to read about my uh, running books, they said maintain a diary so that record every run. Especially how you felt, any aches or pains, which is great advice, because I give that to the people I coach. At least maintain how your legs felt, how your body felt, right? So that if there's an injury that happens, you can nip it in the bud by going back and tracing it to, hey, these shoes are probably that caused something that caused it, or I stepped on a stone or a rock or something, right?
Mhm.
But I used to meticulously note times, 5.25 miles, because I'd go back in a car and measure the distance. And then I would write 45 minutes and 7 seconds or some stupid things like that, right? This is right in the beginning. Until one day I realized that my most beautiful runs, the 2002 Silicon Valley Marathon, where I ran a 3:38, or the 2003 Victoria Marathon, where I ran a 3:37, the Maui Marathon, where I ran a 3:42 or a 3:48. all these beautiful times, even the Sacramento one, where my first one at 3:42 in 2000, all these came when I was not looking at my watch. So I started telling people, it's great. You can train with time, so you get an idea of your pace. But someday, go out for a run without your watch. Do a race without a watch. Just run by feel. And now there are books out there talking about running by feel, etc., etc. Just run by feel, right? Leave the watch alone, because you become a slave to that watch, and you might end up doing stuff that will hurt your chances of finishing or whatever it is your goal you have set your mind to. You become a slave to that time. You don't want to do that. Leave that time alone sometimes, and you'll find some of your best runs, bike rides, whatever the heck it is. Right?
Absolutely. I want to come back to present, and I was reading about some crazy stuff you're doing in the pandemic year. let's spend some time on that.
I also wanted to talk about my race directing, because that's a big part of who I am.
Yes,
eventually,
go ahead.
if you feel like getting to it. So we'll talk about the pandemic, but back in 2000, when I started running my ultras, right, one of the things I realized is that it's a very different world. The road running world is highly competitive, right? And the biggest thing I realized in road running was there's so many people that when someone is having an issue or problem, very few people stop to ask how you're doing, right? The ultra world is very different. These days, you have younger people in the ultra world, but back then, when I started running ultras, remember there were, I was creating a template for myself and for people who were following me. Most of the people who were running ultras in those days were people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, people who used to be runners at one time, road runners, marathoners, but now had taken up ultra running at a different community. And it was such a close knit, beautiful community. It was a lovely community. People would stop on a trail, because running on a trail, if you're injured or hurt, you can't leave someone. On a road, at least there are spectators, someone you can help. But on a trail, it's very hard. So these people are a different mindset, different. It's a very different community. So I fell in love with that community, to the point where I would only run road races if I was pacing someone. I wanted to give back in some way or the other to that community. So one of the ways I realized I could do that, besides volunteering at races, which I used to do, like the 2006 Western States 100, I volunteered. 2007, I was the safety sweep, the medical sweep for the first 31 miles. So the last two people behind the last runner, making sure, they're okay. It's called a sweep. It's called a medical. I forget the exact term. My brain's gotten fried now. But so I took up, it took me 5 minutes. Someone was asking to give up a race because they were having a baby and they were looking for a race director. And I thought for 5 minutes exactly. And I said, I want to do it because I know nothing about race directing. Again, just going back to, coaching, same thing here. I know nothing about race directing. I've never directed a race, but hey, what the heck? Let's find out. This is one way I can give back. I learn along the way and, we'll see how it goes. So I took up a race that had been in place since the 1980s, the Ruth Anderson 50K, 50-mile, 100K race. I was given a template. This is how you have to do the registration. This is the course. This is how runners run. These are the rules. All I had to do was organize the volunteers and organize the race. So I cut my eye teeth, race directing eye teeth, in the Ruth Anderson race, 2008, 2009, 2010, all the way up until 2019. But one of the things I realized is that that Ruth Anderson race was a race that was part of the PAUSATF team of races. It was competitive. The other thing I realized is that, when people used to ask me, wow, you do 100 miles, you do 140 miles, 150 miles, it's amazing. I could never do that. Not that I wanted to minimize my own achievements, but I realized that there were people out there who were interested, who were runners themselves maybe, who were interested in these distances, but somehow were either not physically capable, maybe, of meeting cutoffs. A lot of these races have tight, stringent cutoffs, right? Most 100-mile races, unless they happen to be very hilly, usually have a time period of 30 hours, and they have intermediate cutoffs. If you don't make the cutoff, if you enter at the aid station a minute late, they pull you. Usually, Western states, they pull you right away. You can't argue. So I wanted to give back in that way. I wanted to create a race that would let some of these people achieve their dream. Whatever that dream was, it could be a 50K, it could be a 50-mile race, it could be 100K, it could be 100 miles, right? I wanted to create a race where they wouldn't have to worry about being out alone in the dark on top of a mountain, wondering, geez, am I on the right trail? Am I lost? I don't have enough gels. I don't have enough food. My water is running out. The aid station is 5 miles away. So I was looking to create a race, and I found a place, a 2-mile asphalt loop with a wide dirt shoulder and flat, right? I created a race called Rendezvous, which is a pun on rendezvous, but it's rendezvous as in run of you, French. So I created it as a race for you. You ask for anything, you will get it. I don't care what you ask me for. You want a wheelchair, I'll give you a wheelchair. You want special food, I'll give you special food. That race was all about love. I honestly, it was all about love. I had a wall of love behind where people could put whatever they wanted. If they were running in memory of their brother or their dog or someone they love, whatever it was, they used to put stories up on the wall and everything, right? That race eventually became more than a race. Because of all the years of coaching, I had people show up to volunteer for the race. People who loved me, loved my coaching, loved me. People who were coming out to support the runners who were running the race, who would come and volunteer. All these people formed a humongous community. That race had an aid station, 3 tents, and both sides, right? Both sides, you would see a line of tents, especially for people who are running 100K, 100 miles. Their families, their friends, their children would be in the tents. It was like a picnic. It was a community there. And the children would come and volunteer. The adults, the mothers, the sisters, they would come and volunteer. They would come back year after year. It became an event. It wasn't a race anymore. It became an event. It was my way of giving back to the community. The other thing I did was,
So what happened to that race? Is it still on?
hold on. So I'll tell you. I'll tell you. So what happened is, in that race, I realized that there were people who, even though it was a flat race, when you're at 90 miles, it becomes a hard thing to summon those last reserves of stamina, motivation, right? So I changed the rule to, if you can make it to 98 miles, 49 loops, it was 50 loops, remember, of 2 miles. If you can make it to 98 miles before 32 hours are complete, you can take 10 hours for the last 2 miles. You can go to sleep. I'll still be there to give you a finish medal, right? I wanted to make it a little easier for them. And it's happened. It's happened where that last lap took almost 2.5 hours, and I waited. That was my way of giving back to the community. That was my way of telling people, right, that here, this is your chance to dream big and achieve it. I'm here to help you. I'm here to do whatever it takes. Whatever you need, I'm here. Just go and do it. That community has become such a beautiful community today. They keep asking me, are you going to have the race? I could not have it last year because of the pandemic. And again, this year, Santa Clara County is probably at the moment not letting more than 25 people do any kind of an event. So I don't think it's going to happen this year. And I think that race served its purpose. Maybe I'll bring it back in some format, not necessarily 100 miles.
How many years did you have that?
2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. So 9 years. The race was held for 9 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh man,
that's amazing.
It was a fun race. It was a fun race.
It's amazing.
And so many people came to run. They would run at night. I introduced them to night running. All these people that I coached for the last 9, 10 years in Viva. I used to tell them, look, I used to let people start whenever they wanted to. 8 o'clock in the morning for the regular 50K start, but you feel like starting at night, 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock, come and start at night and run a night 50K. These people got they fell in love with night running. Otherwise, who goes out and runs at night, Santosh? Think about it.
Yeah.
Most people sleep at night. So that race has 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 filled a huge hole in my heart. The whole being giving more and more back to the community, creating a community, ultra running community, creating a community, and it's not about the ego. It's just about giving back. It's just about watching, as you said, someone finish a 100-mile race, 100K, and you should see the joy in their face is indescribable. It's just phenomenal. So maybe it'll come back in some form or the other. Let's see. It takes a
Very
lot of work.
clear, very clear, Rajiv. No, I completely get what you're saying and from where you're coming from, because it obviously something what you've done in terms of whether it's coaching in Asha, and I've heard like thousands of people out there who are coached by you or doing this race for like almost 8-9 years. It can't be a issue. You can't run it on ego energy. No way.
No,
No
never,
way. It's
never.
obviously what's clear is you're driven by, at least for me, what I'm hearing is you're driven by something bigger than yourself. You're driven by bringing joy to people. While
Truly.
you do enjoy your own personal running, but definitely your running journey is not just about you. It's about community. It's about
No, it's not.
making a difference to people. So very
It's not.
clear, and thank you for that.
Every runner I've met in my life has helped me become who I am today. Every person, in fact, right? And so this is my way of thanking them, whether I thank them personally or thank them through doing something for the community at large, whether it's the ultra running community or the running community or just the world at large.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure the Bay Area is very lucky to have you for what you've done.
I'm lucky to be in the Bay Area, honestly. I'm lucky to be here. I've created some of the most beautiful friendships here. Yes, beautiful friendships. People who inspire me. In turn, I've inspired them. Life is about holding each other's hands, right? So yes, going back to the pandemic.
Yeah. Or rather, coming back to pandemic. We are still in the middle of it.
Coming back to this pandemic thing. I remember reading last year, sometime in April, May, about some person. I forget where he was. Maybe he was in France, some country, some European country. And he ran a marathon in his balcony. And I don't imagine, he was in an apartment, so I don't imagine his balcony was very, very wide. So I said, if the guy can do a marathon in his balcony, right? It's kind of raining outside. I could go and run in the rain, but what the heck? Let's do something to get out of my comfort zone. Why don't I run inside the home, right? So again, it's about getting outside the comfort zone.
Yeah.
I cannot build up any steam or speed. I can't build up head of steam here. There's no way. I would run for exactly 20 steps fast and then slow down because I've got to slow down to turn around and then go back again. So I said, so one day, I think a couple of times, because I was so busy at home with work and everything, and it was like a Friday evening or a Wednesday evening, I was telling Anu, I would tell Anu, look, I can't go out and run. I don't want to go out and run right now, but I'm going to run here. So I would run from the bedroom, down the steps, down to the basement, back up again. So I did about 3-4 miles. And I said, hey, this is doable, man. This is cool. So then another day I said, let me try this again. So I did like 5 miles. So I said, hey, this is not bad. So the evening before that Saturday morning, I said, I'm going to run 4 miles. So I did 4 miles here to check it out. I said, hey, this is good. So I woke up in the morning. I wake up very early. I wake up at 4 and 5 in the mornings. So that morning I started at 6:30. I had my coffee. I started at 6:30. And my intention was not to do a marathon or anything. My intention was just to run some 12 or 13 miles. That's all I was doing. That's all my intention was, just to do some running here, right? Because I don't want to go out. I just want to stay at home. And Anu had gone out for a hike with a friend. And when she came back, she said, are you still running? I said, yeah. She said, I need to eat, so we need to make some lunch. Can you cut some onions and some cabbage and stuff for me? So I said, okay. So I cut onions, I cut cabbage, I cut some chilies, and I cut some ginger and stuff. And then I started running again. So it was fun. And then I realized, oh, I'm already at 15, 16 miles. Okay, so let's go to, whatever, 10 o'clock in the morning, whatever the heck it is. So I got to 10 o'clock and it was at 18 point something. Let's say I'm just making this up, 18 point something miles. So I said, hey, what the heck? I can make it 20 miles. So I got to 20 miles and I said, well, it's kind of like 12:37. Let's run to 1 o'clock. So eventually, the stupid thing turned out to be 26.5 miles, right? Because I just kept saying, let's go to 2 o'clock, let's go to 1 o'clock, let's go to 12:45, and it turned out to be 26.5 miles because by then I said, okay, I'm done. I'm hungry. I want to eat. So then I said, hey, this is something that's kind of cool. I can do something like this. So the following weekend, I deliberately made an effort to do 31 miles.
Oh, wow.
So I did 31 miles.
Totally.
Or
So what's
know
next
when
for
to
you?
change tack. So
Yeah.
what's next for me? Yeah, you probably have the same thing in Houston. There are not many races around. I mean, trail races. There are other races. There are races, but I don't know if there are enough people out there with the courage to hold races because it can get hoary. Having said that, California is doing well. So Santa Clara is slowly starting to issue permits. I signed up, as I said, the GUCR is a race after my heart. I will go back and run that race every year if I can. I'm one of the 20 or 25 people who, even if my name is not picked in the lottery, gets an automatic entry. I'm the only one who goes from the US to run that race. So every year, if I can, I will go back next year to run it. At the end of August, I'm signed up to run the Liverpool to Leeds 130 miler, but I don't think I'm going to go because I could go alone and run it, but someone who loves me a lot is adamant that I'm not going to go. So I'm not going to go.
Yeah.
So the race I'm running now is the Dick Collins 50 miler. It's here in near Berkeley, Berkeley area. I ran it in 2008, 2009. It's one of those 10, 15, whatever, 15, 50 milers I've run. It's a beautiful course. It's a run in the East Bay Hills. I think it's on the 25th of September. So I'll run that. On my own, sometime in May, I'm heading off to San Diego this weekend for some work and stuff. But on my own, I am going to go back and run the old Quicksilver 50K race on my own, the route, the course on my own. I'll put water in a couple of places and I'll go run 31 miles. It may take me a long time because I'm no longer as fast as I used to be. But it's not about speed. It's about just going and running in a park on a course that I love. I absolutely love that park, Quicksilver Park. So I'll do that sometime in May. Suspect it'll probably be around the third week of May. That's about it. Next year, when things open up, I'll probably go back and run the American River 50 miler, which is being held on the 8th of May right now. But I'm not going to go run it again for the same reason because of the pandemic. It's being held.
Okay.
So that's about it.
Got it. No,
My coaching, now and then I'll coach. Right now, there's no coaching happening. I mean, it's the pandemic. Nothing's happening. That's
got
about
it.
it.
Terrific, Rajiv. That was a
Thank you, Santosh.
very
Thank you for
insightful.
letting me ramble on
No, it was.
because I can
There's
talk
so much.
forever. I can talk
Yeah.
forever. I can talk about any topic under the sun because one of the things I do is I read a lot. You name a topic except business. I'm not a fan of business, economics, business. Name anything else, I'll talk.
That's very unusual for
get me to
somebody
talk.
who's a Patel.
Oh, thank you. I love one of my first girlfriends, right?
Offbeat.
Long time ago. One of my first girlfriends. My first girlfriend, in fact. We were playing Trivial Pursuit, and she, one of the things she would ask me is, I come from a state where people are the most intellectual in India, and you come from a business state. How come you know more than I do? So I burst out laughing, and she obviously would start laughing also. But that Patel thing. But yes, you're right. You are right. I'm an unusual Patel. Let's put it that way.
You're an offbeat guy overall.
No,
Like
I am an
you try
unusual
new stuff.
Patel. My favorite music in the world is Western classical music, Hindustani classical music. That's Western classical music. I love. I read about everything under the sun. You have no idea what I read and how much stuff is stored in my brain. And that's one of the things I do when I'm running. I'll to make it so that that distance isn't daunting, especially when I take them running up hills. I'll give them puzzles to do. I'll teach them something, especially about the history of running if they're interested, about the marathon. The word maratho in classical Greek means fennel. Fennel as in soft in India, because a lot of fennel must have been growing in that bay of Marathon where the battle took place on the beach. So the word maratho means fennel. So today you have run your distances, half marathons, and beyond. And I have run marathons because of some silly little thing called fennel, a plant called fennel.
Yeah.
So blame the fennel when you're hurting at the end of a race. It's that little thing that some people like and some people don't like. We are hurting because of that thing there. So,
Absolutely. Hey, I
thank
want to
you,
move to the
Santosh.
next part of our conversation, which is
Sure.
I have
That rapid fire
a
question
bunch of
thing.
rapid fire of questions, and
Sure.
for some fun,
Now
let's
I'm
see.
nervous. No, I'm
we
kidding.
let's
No,
get you into some real uncomfortable zone now.
sure.
That's just kidding. No,
No, ask me
nothing of
whatever
the
you want.
kind. Some general questions. Just
I'll try to be politically correct.
all right. Ready for it?
Sure.
Is that your dog that's making the sound?
Yeah, the poor baby has some heart issues, coughing.
Ah, okay.
13
No
years
worries.
old. We haven't nailed it down, but I think it's some heart issues. His mother had it
Okay.
too. His sister has it too. Poor baby.
No worries. No problem. All right. You ready?
Sure.
All right. The first one for you. What's your favorite junk food?
My favorite junk food? Oh boy. Okay, so that again, classify junk. Please classify junk. Please,
Junk.
honestly,
Anything.
I'm not trying to deflect the question. Please tell me what do you mean by junk? Junk, honestly.
Junk food, fried,
American,
unhealthy,
Indian junk, what?
anything. Whatever is yours. Whatever is your
Okay, so
junk.
Indian
Favorite.
junk. I love chiura. You know what
Chivada.
chiura is? In the South, they call it something else. They call it, what do they call it? Mix? No, what do they call it?
Mixture.
Company, something like that it's called.
Okay.
What is it called? In Bangalore, what do they call it?
Chivada?
Something
I
they
don't
call
know
it.
what chivada is
That,
called.
that mix you get, no? What is it called, Anu? Murmuri or something.
Murmuri. Okay.
Something like that. But chura,
Something
man.
like
Give me
chivada.
chura and a cup of chai. Ah, I
But
could
yeah,
eat,
yeah.
keep eating.
That's not too bad. It's not too much of a junk.
That's true.
It's a healthy junk.
It's fried stuff, though, right? It's fried. It's all the fried stuff, the fried poha and all that stuff.
Yeah. All right. Next one. The worst thing about being an ultra runner.
Good question. Having to go to do a big job and not being able to do it in time.
Good one.
Everything else is cool.
Yeah, good one. Good answer. Good answer.
It's happened to me a couple of times. So, yeah.
All right. What's your favorite gadget for running?
My favorite gadget for running. Oh, boy, that's a good question. Oh, man. I really don't use gadgets when I'm running. But if you had to ask me what a gadget, my favorite gadget is, I want to say it's my powerful 1000 lumen hand flashlight.
Okay. Good one.
I love shining the flashlight on things at night. And when I'm running the GUCR or the Thames Ring or the 100 milers when I run at night, I love shining stuff on bridges, on trees, the heck of it, across the canal, across the trail to see what's up there. That's it. That's my favorite gadget. I have a lot. So it is true because I own about 10, 15 flashlights that range in power from 200 lumens all the way to 3000 lumens.
Yeah.
So yes,
Yeah.
that's my favorite gadget.
That's a new one. Nobody's ever said that in the show. All right. The last one I have is, if a movie were made of you, what genre would it be and who would you like to play you?
What genre it would be and who would I like to play me? If a movie were to be made of me, what the genre would be and who would I like to play my role? It would have to be a comedy, honestly. And I know exactly who I would want to play me, even though he's 6 feet 2 inches tall and far better looking than I am. I simply love Abhishek Bachchan.
Oh, wow.
If you ever watch him in Jhoom Barabar Jhoom, have you watched that movie? If you have not, please watch him. I am a devoted, I used to love Amitabh Bachchan, but there's something about Abhishek Bachchan's comedy that just cracks me up. So he's 6'2", I'm 5'8". He's far better looking. I'm not as good looking, but I would like him to play me. And it would be
Awesome.
comedy.
That's awesome because, my wife's a fan of Abhishek Bachchan and not many people I know who are fans.
Really?
Yes.
Your wife is someone that I know I will get along with if she's a fan of Abhishek Bachchan.
Well, Abhishek Bachchan, I hope you're hearing, man. This is
I know if
awesome.
you're hearing this. I just adore that guy, man. He's a really good actor. Especially in that Jumba. I have watched that movie at least 10 times. Anu and I put it in just because we want to watch this guy's expression. I don't know if you remember this, but his cell phone ringtone was, "Hey handsome. Hey handsome." Hey,
All right. Good choice. Good, very unusual choice.
Go
but good
check it
choice.
out again. Go check out the movie and this time sit with your wife and she'll point out the finer details, Santosh. And you might get to appreciate that man.
Absolutely. I might just become a fan.
You might become a fan. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It was fantastic.
It's fantastic.
And thank
We're
you
coming
for
to kind
everything
of-
you do.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We're coming to kind of wrapping up, and really, yes, I thank you for that, and I really appreciate you taking the time out. And I know your life, your running life, is so rich, and there's so much, and sometimes it's hard to capture all of that in 1 or 2 hours. But I think
No,
hopefully we've captured as much as we can.
Oh, you have. Whatever running is my life. I mean, Anu is my life. But if you had to ask me what other than running, because running has given me so much in my life. It's given me everything that I am today, including the fact that I met Anu when I coached her in 2003. It's given me a lot of. It's brought me unlimited bounties in my life. It's bountiful. My life has been
Beautiful.
I'm grateful.
All right.
It got me to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a purpose.
All
for
right.
everything.
So, Rajeev,
Thank
I
you.
will let you go. Have you rest of the evening. Enjoy it, and we shall stay in touch. Thank you
I'm
again.
going to make some uttappams and eat them right now.
I thought chivda.
No, I am going to have some chura. It's lying there. But after that, I'll have actual healthy food, right? Uttappam.